growing up, I learned as a coping skill to kind of just not be present mentally. And so I've been working over the years on being present, but it is hard. And I'm not even sure what are great tools to use. So I was hoping you could help me with that.
I can help you with that because it's something I've had to work in a lot. And this question, because I do, some degree of my work, a lot of my work sometimes is in the faith community, and there is, for those of you who don't understand what she's talking about, there's a lot in especially the more conservative end of the faith spectrum, that they get very paranoid, and I'll use that word because that's just what I believe. Um, they get kind of paranoid of anything that's not propositional in nature. In other words, if it's not if it's not a sentence in the Bible or a belief or something in your head in a, you know, sort of like, I don't know, real rigid and black and white, then it's bad, right? Am I getting this right, Lori?
Yes.
And so you take stuff like psychology sometimes falls into that bad category for them, people that think like that. But mindfulness, oh my gosh, that's like woo scary because they equate it with New Ageism. So, in the New Age movement, there's all sorts of spiritual practices and all this kind of stuff that a lot of which in my view are a crazy and B, not helpful, and some of them even destructive. Not all of them, okay? But here's the thing: a lot of times in the Christian world, on the conservative end, they will basically look at anything basically that's from the right hemisphere of the brain or connected to those kinds of functions as bad. Now, what mindfulness is, and part of why this got a bad reputation, Lori, is that mindfulness is also a cousin of practices that's used in a lot of Eastern religions. Like, if you look at Buddhism, for example, it talks about detachment, right? And the way you get to all these altered states and stuff, and there's a lot of mental practices that go into that. You look at some transcendental meditation, a bunch of stuff that kind of gets into some funny lands. Okay. But the science, let's just talk about the science for a second. What mindfulness basically is, and by the way, Lori, are you a boundaries.me member?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so go on there and put in mindfulness because I've actually got a course on this in there. So
Okay.
so here's basically the science of mindfulness, and this is really, really important for all of us to learn, is that your brain and your mind are two different things. You see, your brain is a physical organ, just like your liver and everything else. And as a physical organ, it's always working and it's got hardware and software to it and chemicals and all this. And what your brain does is it produces things that we call thoughts, right? So, for example, if somebody's fear centers get triggered and you have a cortisol, you know, spouting in your brain, all of a sudden you're going to feel feelings of anxiety and dread, and then thoughts are going, oh my gosh, the plane's going down, oh my gosh, something bad's going to happen. Wait, and you're thinking all of this stuff, but it's actually being produced by your brain, not by your mind, because your mind is not physical, it's spiritual, emotional, psychological, but at least it's immaterial. All right, so here's the big deal. What mindfulness does is mindfulness says, look, get out of your automatic thoughts and stop grabbing them as they go by. If you have a thought, because people have, oh no, what if this happens? As soon as the what if happens, they grab it as if it's worth listening to, and they'll start to worry about it and think about it. obsessively ruminate about it. When in reality, it has nothing to do with reality. It's just a physiologically produced thought. And what mindfulness says is don't grab or attach to every thought that comes in. Okay. Get into a place
Okay.
where you're above your thoughts, which means I'm watching them. I'm being present in my body, and I'm being present, and I'm noticing, oh, there's that thought. But I'm not grabbing it, I'm just watching it go by. Or there's that tightness in my chest. I'm not obsessing about it and grabbing it, I'm staying mindful of it. So it's basically getting into an observing space in your head. All right. And that
Okay.
does incredible things that are good. It reduces your blood pressure. It normalizes a lot of metabolic functioning. It decreases all the stress hormones and adrenal stuff. There's 1,000 different things it does, which are really great because you are doing something. You ready for this? You're going to like this, Lori. You're doing something that the Bible tells us to do. Psalm
Okay.
139. Psalm 139. It's a great example where David says, God, try my anxious thoughts. Look at my anxious thoughts and see if there's anything hurtful in them and lead me in the way of the everlasting or in the way that I'm supposed to be thinking. In other words, David is saying, I got all this noise in my head. I'm looking at it. Maybe it's not all good. Maybe I need to observe this stuff instead of just accept it as truth. That's mindfulness practice. Another place where Paul says, take every thought captive. Okay. Right
Yeah.
now, people's thoughts are taking them captive. It says, take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. So we got these thoughts.
Right.
No, I'm going to get above those. Well, that's not what God says. I'm going to discard that. So you're getting above it to your thing about presence in Matthew 6. Jesus says, stop thinking about all this stuff and worry about all this stuff. He says, today has enough to be presently worried about and solving. Live in the moment. He said, which of you, by obsessing about anything, can add 1 hour to your life? You can't. And there's a momentary, always a present focus. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but basically, you're getting into your mind where you're observing and being present with life instead of being driven by automatic thoughts, which is no different than a German Shepherd. Does that help?
Okay. It does. And so if you've, so I have a, it's a struggle. I have a practice where growing up, I just learned how to. We used to call it daydreaming, not realizing the harm that we were doing by learning to just kind of not be present. So is
Yeah.
it? I mean, what I do right now is when I catch myself, excuse me, when I catch myself, I redirect my thoughts. And I make myself aware of it, and I remind myself to be present. Is there
Yeah.
anything more that I can do?
Well, yeah, I think there's, but I think that you put your finger on something really, really important. And what you're calling daydreaming is kind of on the continuum to dissociating, right? Because people that are involved in a lot of pain and stuff going around them, they'll actually go into altered worlds and imaginary worlds. Children do this a lot in order to cope with what's going on in the real world. So you get disengaged from being present because if you were present, it would be way too painful. So what you're doing
Right.
is now in your maturity, you're seeing, oh, I'm going there. I need to come back to reality. And then the next step is, you want in the next step, the next step is in your mindfulness of the reality, what am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? What are my fears? And staying present with that and letting that stuff just, metabolize. And it may be helpful too. Sometimes you need to also be talking to somebody when you're doing this kind of awareness because you're confessing it, you're getting it out, right? You're expressing it. That's going to do a lot of things to change it. So actually, I would use the daydreaming as a trigger to mindfulness. In other words, start daydreaming. Oh, I think I need to be present. And then I need to observe what it is I'm really, what's going through my head here. And then that can lead you to what all of that pain is about and help you actually in the road to growth and recovery.